Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time to reckon with the fact that because I run a music channel, I gotta talk about Drake. Legendary Toronto rapper who is in the midst of preparing for a new album cycle, Iceman, which will be his 9th solo studio album. And it's clear he is not taking the lead up to this record lightly. After all, he has given us 2 singles from the record thus far, and at the time of me shooting this video, he is about to drop the 3rd installment of this Iceman visual experience, where, among other things, Drake depicts himself as being stalked by this weird Pinocchio-type character, which is just such a painfully on-the-nose attempt at symbolism that I have to laugh. Now, this isn't something many of Drake's fans and sycophants on Twitter are willing to acknowledge, but Champagne Papi has been on the back foot for more than a year now. But losing one of the biggest and most highly publicized rap beefs of all time has a tendency to do that. And for Drake, resetting the narrative and wiping the slate clean has proven to be very difficult, in part because echoes of the beef are still hard to tune out a year later, not like us getting multiple Grammys, obviously the Super Bowl performance. But as much as I'm sure it sucks for Drake to have this song shoved in his face over and over and over, we also have to acknowledge that a lot of his own behavior has drawn attention back to it too, like his ongoing massive defamation suit against UMG, which time and time again has proven to just be like another reason to talk about the beef and not like us. Even this past August, it was revealed that among Drake's discovery requests were whatever information the label might have on the paternity of Kendrick's children, something many fans and haters alike found to be kind of tasteless and gross, which of course caused people to start streaming Not Like Us en masse again, bringing it up to number 5 on the rap streaming charts. So we're repeatedly seeing signs that Drake really wants this whole thing to go away, but he can't seem to stop getting in his own way. But now enter this new interview with podcast fail daughter Bobbi Althoff, someone whose existence I hate to acknowledge because I don't know if there's been a more pointless personality in the content creation space as of late, especially considering there are already interviewers out there who play with the idea of performative ignorance and awkwardness a lot more creatively, or like just in a way that doesn't alienate both the listener and the guest. Like, she just comes across as patently unlikable in pretty much every piece of content I've seen her in, and up until this point, her actual career highlight has been interviewing Drake once in 2023, which did have some legitimately viral moments to it, it's true, but it was subsequently taken down because I guess the both of them ended up on bad terms at some point, which also coincided with Bobbi's career careening into a ditch with sponsors and podcast guests drying up. And look, a lot of this for Bobbi is very personal, and I don't know enough to comment on every single aspect of it, but Bobbi and Drake have miraculously found themselves in a place yet again where they can mutually benefit from one another and maybe engage in a bit of you scratch my back, I scratch yours, let's launder each other's respective reputations here, which has led to this Bobbi Althoff podcast relaunch. Not this again, which I can commend her for reading everyone's collective mind when seeing this happening. As much as Bobbi and Drake try to portray this as this chill, funny, flirty, no plans, no pressure type conversation, it actually feels a lot more methodical and manipulative once you pull back that window dressing. Because again, even though the tone of the conversation reads as if Drake and Bobbi are just shooting the shit without a care in the world, they somehow just manage to casually and effortlessly saunter into every major talking point that both of them have been needing to address for a while, as like this is the first big convo each of them have been involved in, not just since Drake's beef with Kendrick Lamar, but also since Bobbi abruptly ended her podcasting career. So again, what's the mutual exchange here? To start, what does Bobbi get out of it? Well, to begin begin, they essentially get to go over every little detail of how her and Drake had their falling out to begin with and what brought both of them back together to make up. And as Bobbi openly acknowledges in this conversation, Drake essentially cutting her off and distancing himself from her as part of what like really began to make her career do a nosedive in the first place.
That sounded crazy.
I'm just saying, it was like after that, it was like pretty hard. I was like, people were like, oh,
yeah,
how could he like put her on and then take her off right after?
Why would take you off?
But that's kind of how people saw it. That's how people saw it.
Also in this podcast, she gets Drake laying across from her, telling her that she is such a good mom, like the best mom of all time. He can't even believe it.
You were asking for like the first flight out. Like, you're like, I have to get back to my kids. You were just pumping out.
Oh my God.
That pure white.
Thank you.
And it's funny because even though these two clearly have a familiarity with each other and they describe numerous moments where they're kind of like hanging out and traveling in order to do this interview, I still don't really get the sense that Drake knows enough about her to like really definitively say that she's like such an amazing mom. And the only shred of proof he seemingly has of that is this story about pumping breast milk that he goes into, which I mean, obviously for a young new mom is a very normal thing, but Drake somehow makes the topic just feel really weird in ways that are just unnecessary and frankly, like, you know, don't flatter Bobbi as much as this story should.
Oh, there were cows in Tennessee that were jealous.
I was hooked up to the
Their
wall.
udders couldn't even comprehend how we could have had a bakery, a butter factory. We could have done anything. I mean,
a butter factory. This is
honestly
okay. That's I appreciate the
this is all a compliment.
It is. I appreciate the compliment behind all of this.
It was
milk sauce.
It was like 2%, 1% skim.
Bobbi also gets Drake like really solidifying that connection with her and saying that like he sees potential in her and says that people needlessly hate on her and affirms the idea that people just like don't get what she does and that's why they're so angry at her in the first place. Which again, I don't know enough about Bobbi personally to say how much of this stuff is or isn't true, but what is clear is that one of the only purposes this podcast serves is to trick me into thinking what it's pushing.
Just recognizing somebody that I never met in my life, that I fully believed in, that I thought was really interesting and I wanted to have an interesting conversation with. It pissed off like so many like all these fucking losers, you know, like story journalists only to like sit with Zane Lowe while he like asks you like the most like curated and formal questions. No disrespect to him, you know, like I think we did something that was special.
Like on some level, this just feels like Bobbi Althoff propaganda. And then there's the Drake side of all of this, because Drake has his own series of points he wants to casually go over and dispel. And Bobbi Althoff is the perfect person to help him do exactly this, because as an interview, she famously knows almost little to nothing about her guests. And even when she does happen to know something about them, you're lucky if you get a fucking follow-up question. And once again, the only awkwardness that comes across in this conversation seems to stem mostly from Bobbi's social anxiety, not because she's like asking any tough questions or anything like that. But yeah, in the midst of this conversation, Drake essentially tries to address the idea that he's like a BBL drizzy and that his abs are fake, claiming at one point that like, you know, he showed Bobbi his abs and more or less like, you know, I guess that's like confirmation enough the abs are real.
Oh, like, are your abs real?
Why are you acting like that's not a question everyone has? People think you got a procedure done.
Really?
Did you do that?
No.
Is that a thing?
I'm sure it is.
Why do you know that? Okay.
People also say that I got a BBL, right? BBL jersey. So
oh, that's true. Did you?
I don't know if my like wagon looked crazy when I walked in here, but
Drake also gets to show his audience that he's not petty and he's not mean and he's not an angry guy, because look at the way he's like let Bobbi back into his heart here. And in one of the most emotionally intense moments of the entire conversation, Drake goes into the ongoing accusation that as an artist, he does a lot more taking than he does giving in terms of all of the various collabs he's done with rap artists over the years, especially rappers and singers from Atlanta.
Even in music, people will be like, oh, like you're a culture vulture, or like you, you know, like people will describe the collaborative efforts that I've put forth and the artists that I've picked up and lifted up or shine a light on as me taking, they'll put a negative spin on it and try and tell me, that it's a self-serving thing or whatever. And I think I get really sensitive about that.
But he doesn't exactly go into backing up that point, nor does he even address where that criticism comes from. It just really upsets him to the point where he's almost in tears, and we're just supposed to take him at his word and basically say, okay, I mean, he almost cried. I guess like that criticism doesn't really matter or mean anything. Even the offhanded comment toward the end of the podcast about Drake being more willing to rep Toronto than someone from LA would be with repping LA.
You're from LA, right?
I mean, in the area.
In the area. Nobody wants to claim it now. Nobody wants to bang it around the gang in the area.
Claim what?
No, nothing.
Okay. What are you trying to say?
No, it's all good.
Todd, did anything?
I know where I'm from. From that 6. If you ask me, I'm from that shit.
Is that Toronto?
Yeah.
Even that feels massively calculated, and when you actually think about it, doesn't even make sense. So yeah, those are some points that are addressed in the midst of this podcast, but believe me when I tell you, the vast majority of this thing is just mind-numbing filler. Even toward the halfway point of this conversation, as Bobbi says, it's time to like start the interview. The conversation gets no more deep or serious than it's been up until that point, as you basically go from one story after the other of Bobbi essentially getting like white girl wasted as she's hanging out with Drake, to Drake essentially going off on this rant about how into goth girls with big boobs he is.
I really feel like my destiny is to end up with like a goth baddie with just absolute
those 2 words.
And how he hasn't like popped out with one yet because they don't want him, and he doesn't think like the world is ready for him to be publicly with a long-term partner like he would want, that they would understand or something. Like, why does what the world thinks about who you actually want to date in your heart even factor? What the hell does that matter? That, among many other things in this podcast, especially the moments in which Bobbi and Drake kind of detail their falling out, just feel so high school. Like, these are not ways in which rational adult people see and interact with and interpret the world. But yeah, once again, this Bobbi conversation comes across as yet another either somewhat canned or very planned out public conversation where Drake kind of needs to clear the air, but there's a lot of boundaries around everything that is being talked about and said, along with what is presumably also a lot of heavy editing going into the final product. Given, again, not just all of the talking points addressed across the convo, all of which are just like glossed over in a very nonchalant way, not dug into with any sort of significance. And then the lengthy passage of time that seems to occur over the course of the podcast, which is 90 minutes in length, but it seems like they've been talking for hours. So yeah, very odd, boring video, unfortunately, where nothing is like meaningfully addressed at all in terms of the beef, in terms of UMG stuff, in terms of anything really. And those are my thoughts on that. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments. I'm sure you will. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Bobbi Althoff, Drake, forever.